Hey guys, welcome back to Ironside. So you can see our classroom construction is coming along. We do have a green screen behind us, which we're not going to be using for this video, but certainly making some good progress here. So let's let me grab a seat here and let's talk. So what I thought we would talk about. Well, all right, my door's popping open. Whoa, I got to get that. It's cold. There's no handle on the door yet, so it just kind of flies open. And it is chilly out. So I thought, well, let's do this video and let's talk about some things that like the kind of prepping items that people overlook. And so first disclaimer, Madeline and I, we never thought about us being the preppers, right? So I talked about this before. We are homesteaders, we're small-time ranchers, small business owners, definitely not preppers. And but there's some overlap there, right? So the prepper mentality, I guess, is we just kind of differ in the mentality on some things, but really we just are trying to get through to like the next harvest season. But we certainly see that, hey, there's things going on in this world that should be cause for concern, and that if you're being honest with yourself and being prudent about things, you'll pay attention to and you'll look at and say, well, you know, here are the signs. This is just a reality. Let's get rid of the normalcy bias. This is what this is telling me. If I look at this objectively, if I pulled myself out of this situation and looked objectively at this, what is this telling me? So what is the world telling you right now? Do you think that we're going to be in a better place in 5 years than we are today? You know, that's just a reality of it. And so we have to look at that and think, okay, maybe we should prepare for this, even if we're not preppers, right? And then there's always the argument that we're all preppers. We just don't know it because we all buy life insurance. We all buy insurance on our houses or insurance on our vehicles or whatever. So, it's just a matter of what extent. That's a reasonable argument anyways. So what I thought about is well, there's these items that people overlook that we need. And not necessarily need so much as desire, right? And so that's what a lot of this comes down to. We can live off of loincloths and with spears and knives and bow and arrow and running on the plains of the Serengeti. You know, people have been doing that for thousands of years. I mean, that's just how we want to live, which is part of the reason why I've always felt like knowledge is more important than the gear and the prepping aspect of it, because it's not, food that's in short supply. It's the brains that are in short supply because, if we start studying botany and learning what to harvest around us, we can live fairly comfortably off of what we can find and forage and hunt and gather and trap, and provided that we have the knowledge to do that. Most people, just reality of it is we don't have the knowledge to do that. Even those of us that are outdoorsmen that like to think that we have the knowledge. I think if you haven't watched the show Alone, go watch that, because that'll tell you, that'll really humble you on how much your knowledge and experience is good for. So, all right. So what are people forgetting? Well, let's talk about some comfort items. Comfort items are very important, and one of the big things that I look at is coffee filters and coffee grounds, right? Or coffee beans, because the fact is that we need these comfort foods, and then weaning ourselves off of something that which is a drug that we have become dependent on. It's not obviously a good time when things go bad. But I remember when I was doing like field training exercises, or when I was in the Army, or like when I was in Afghanistan, and we'd be out on patrol, or we'd be gone from any type of base for an extended period of time. One of the things that I missed the most, and that I remember like salivating over and thinking about, was coffee. I would have given my left leg to be able to wake up in the morning and have some coffee. And I think that's really important to realize, that these comfort items have a certain value beyond just being comforting. It allows us to, when things are going to hell in a handbasket, and this may not be a global catastrophe. This could be as simple as you losing your job in the next round of layoffs, which we know are coming. But having things like having some coffee stored back is very important. Now, I remember a friend of mine, he got laid off in 2008, and he was a big time prepper, and he had like a year and a half worth of food stockpiled, and he lived off of that instead of like food stamps. Cause he's like, no, I have this stockpiled here. Like why would I go on food stamps? I've got this, and I can take some time to find a job. It took him a couple months to find a job. He lived off of his food that he had in reserve, and he was good to go. And not that there's anything wrong if you need food stamps. I'm not saying that, but he just didn't need it because he had that capability. So coffee grounds and or coffee beans and coffee filters. Don't forget the filters. Filters are cheap, but filters have a plethora of uses. You can use them for brewing kombucha. You can use them for filtering tea. You can use them for filtering water if you want to filter water. Anything that you need to filter, coffee grounds or coffee filters are incredibly useful for. Okay, so that's first. Second, work gloves. I never see work gloves on these lists. I always see people like, okay, yeah, throw a pair of really cool tactical gloves in your bag. And it's like, tactical gloves, how often do you think what scenario do you have in your mind that you're going into? The scenario that I see is that you're going to be going to work a lot and that you're going to be working in farms or fields or that you're going to be doing stuff on your farm or your homestead or whatever. And so that to me, having lots of sets of work gloves is paramount to your success. And so in leather work gloves, very, very important. That's what I would be looking at. Some type of really well-crafted leather work glove that fit good. I like the ones at Costco, the Costco brand ones, or not Costco brand, it's not Kirkland, but it's one that, only place I know that sells them is Costco. But they have been phenomenal work gloves that they fit really well and they're all leather. I like all leather work gloves because they seem to last a lot longer. But if you guys are like me, you burn through work gloves. And I know there's guys out there that say, oh, if you're tough, you won't wear work gloves. Listen, I did that crap when I was 18. I don't have to do it now. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I'm going to wear work gloves and make my hands a little bit more comfortable when I need to. So I'm not worried about that. You go ahead and worry about that if you want to. All right, so number 3 on our list is work boots. And you always see, again, carry a set of tactical boots in your backpack or whatever, in your car, all this different crap. And I'm like, seriously? I mean, I need like 3 sets of work boots because I'm burning through mine here on the farm. They're getting muddy. They're getting sloshed in water. They're getting manure on them. I had one guy throw a skill saw on my foot. So when I was working construction, they had the blade guard removed off the skill saw, and he throws the skill saw and it lands on my foot. And he was just tossing it to the side because he had cut his board and he tossed it aside, didn't mean to, but it landed right on my foot without a blade guard on it. And luckily I had steel toe boots and it skipped off, but it split the whole end of my toe of my boot open. And so we gotta look at, there's going to be incidents, there's going to be accidents that are going to happen. And so having lots of pairs of work boots, guys, I keep 2 or 3 pairs around at all times, usually minimum of 2, but I generally have 3. I have like 2 that are broken in that are being like used in transition between, and then like 1 that's kind of like working on being broken in a little bit. So I'll just wear it out and about when I go to the grocery store or whatever. But having like quality pairs of work boots, to me is much more important. And than like tactical boots, right? Because I think that they're far more useful. And so that's what I'm going to keep on hand. And a good quality pair of work boots has a lot of uses beyond that. I mean, guys, you can hike in them, you can hunt in them, you can fish in them, you can trap in them, you can do whatever you need to do in a good quality pair of like Danners or Georges or whatever, Wolverines, a good pair of work boots. So that's what I would recommend that you stockpile. Obviously, guys, I should have said this before at the beginning. We're excluding things like the beans and bullets and Band-Aids and stuff. That's kind of obvious, right? Those things make sense. But now these are the things that don't ever make it on people's list. And so the next thing that always makes it on people's list is like knives. Like, oh, you should always have a million knives and ways of cutting things. It's like, okay, I mean, I go through knives like crazy. I go through knives more than a lot of people do. My family always makes this joke on this that I break knives like pretty aggressively because I'm harsh on them and I use them for far more than they were designed to be used for. And this is part of the reason why I no longer buy like $300 Emerson knives, because they fall out of my pocket or I use it to pry something and snap the blade or whatever. And so, but having quality tools, I will say, is more important than knives per se. So I like, you guys, I don't know if you've seen any of my videos, but I like Leathermans. I love, like this is my Leatherman Surge. This is a great tool for anybody that owns a farm. This is what I carry every day. And don't get me wrong, I have pocket knives and stuff, but this is just the thing that always ends up in my pocket. And this is the thing that gets used constantly throughout the day, probably the tool I use the most. But having backup tools, let's say, for example, hammers. You can only have you can't have too many tools, but having these backups and having hammer handles on hand, having a backup set of pliers, not just buying one for your household, because the fact is that if you buy, especially like cheap Husky tools, they're gonna break. I've broken a number of pliers and went to grab something and just the head snapped off because they were cheap pliers. So I would say have two sets. A set that you use and a set that's spare, and you can keep the spare set in your truck so that you have tools in your truck or your car or whatever, keep it in a vehicle kit. But having spare tools on hand to be able to do things, and then having two is one is none type of thing. You can have stuff because one of those something is going to break. It's not a matter of which tool is going to break. Is all you're trying to figure out. It's which tool when, not which tool if. Something is going to break. You're going to break a hammer on or a handle on a hammer. You're going to break the head off your pliers. You'll bend your flat bar, something along those lines. Snapping tips off your screwdrivers. That's probably the most common one. So maybe screwdrivers you ought to have 3 sets of. But bottom line is, guys, I never see it on these lists, but having spare sets of tools to me is more important than having 10,000 rounds of ammo. And don't get me wrong, I am all about stockpiling as much ammo as you possibly can. And I'm never, but from a practical standpoint, let me just preface this. I'm not talking about the ideological standpoint. I'm talking about from a practical nature. How much ammo do you need? Couple hundred rounds is really more than enough. And what I mean by that is, unless you're talking about you're getting into some full-on Civil War scenario where you think people are going to come storm your house and you're going to be defending the Alamo, not probably the likeliest of scenarios. Probably the most likely of the most dangerous courses of action is that you're going to end up with some natural disaster like Katrina, right? And even that would be exceedingly rare, but that happens. Is there anybody in Katrina that was using volleys of ammunition? No, and most people were defending their house. I realize people were defending their houses with AR-15s and stuff like that, but it was a couple hundred rounds at the maximum that was actually required there to be able to do that. And so, unless you're envisioning some Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome situation, then a few hundred rounds is probably more than enough. And so tools to me are far more pragmatic and far more useful than having just a ton of ammunition sitting around that basically doesn't do anything. Go out, use your ammunition, guys. Go out and get some training. By the way, TimberlineTacticalTraining.com. Check us out and we'll help you figure that out. But like I said, I am not above you storing a bunch of ammo. I'm just saying that when we have to prioritize, don't buy the stuff that's cool and negate the stuff that's useful, and that's important. Having things like extra sets of pliers on hand is probably more important than buying another 100 rounds of ammunition. Let's just set the sights there. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you about, and the last thing I'll put on this list, number should be number 5, right? We're at number 5, I think number 5. It should be number 5 anyways. Repair parts for your house, your vehicles, your equipment. Having things around that commonly go wrong is super useful, and I'm talking about specifically like plumbing lines. I have so many. We swapped everything over on our property. We're making everything either PEX or high density polyethylene because it's super tough. I have plumbing fittings. Every time I go to the store and have to buy fittings, I buy extra fittings. So if I need one, if I need a coupling or something like that, I go buy 2 or 3 of them, and I put two of them in a box and I use one of them. I always have PVC glue, even though we don't have that much PVC here on the farm. We do still have some left, even though we're trying to get rid of all of it. But anyways, we try to as much as possible. Like I said, we're trying to swap everything over to high density polyethylene pipe and PEX because those are generally the best. Now, obviously, if you have copper, that's a whole different thing. But if you don't have copper, there'd be no reason to install it now. So that's what we look at. Having the ability to make sweat connections on pipes if you do have any copper around, having the ability to fix small electrical things, having switches and outlets and stuff like that, because those do wear out. Guys, I'm a building inspector by trade. I inspect outlets regularly that have worn out and that no longer have functioning grounds or functioning neutrals, and so you have all kinds of issues with them. Having extras around, having extra light fixtures around because light fixtures will break, swapping out light fixtures for modern more efficient fixtures as electricity prices in this country continue to rise, or as we try to swap over our farms and stuff to solar or hydroelectric or whatever. We want to decrease the power consumption so that we have those abilities to have a little bit more in our control. And so swapping things over to like LED can lights is certainly a better option, plus they're much more robust, but you need to have some extras on hand when you do that, because those LED can lights, even though they do last a very long time, they don't last forever. They're not indefinite. And so specifically in a room that uses a lot of those lights, you want to have, if you have 6-inch can lights, have 6-inch LED replacements, have one sitting on a shelf somewhere. It's not that big a deal. We buy all of ours the same size, so that way I can keep a few spares around and I can always swap them out if I need to. They should last for an incredibly long time. I think there's 50,000 hours on them, so that's a ton of years on one of those things. And that's the guaranteed hours, right? I'm assuming they probably go a lot longer than that. But having spare parts around. If you're a farmer and you don't have spare fencing parts around, you're in for a huge heartache. Make sure you have spare fencing parts around so that you can conduct those repairs when need be. You are going to have to repair fencing because tree limbs are going to fall on it. Cattle are going to push through it. A pig's going to charge it and snap a wire. A deer's going to try to jump it and land on the line. We had one, I unloaded a hay bale and I dropped it off the hay spear and it rolled down the hill and went crashing through the fencing line. It was kind of funny actually because it didn't actually do any damage. It literally, the whole bale unrolled and then what was left squeezed right through the fence lines and then they just snapped back in place. It was kind of comical. Anyways, so things will happen, guys. Accidents will happen. Things will break. And so you're making a huge mistake and a huge issue for yourself if you don't have these spare parts on hand. Considering things like vehicles and tractors, our tractor is very important. It's paramount to the success of our farm. It'd be very difficult for us to run our farm without it. We could do it, but it would make things a lot harder. So I need to keep my tractor up and going at all times, if at all possible. And so that's part of the reason why I would like to get another tractor, so we have a spare tractor. I just went through and did a whole maintenance day. I spent like 6 hours yesterday running through doing maintenance, changing out grease zerks, changing out different bearings and stuff, and just really going through front to back on the tractor. Did a little bit of welding and some different projects, but you guys want to make sure that you do all these projects and get your maintenance done. One of the things that I do after I go through and I do like an oil change and stuff like that, I order the new filters and the new oil and I keep them on hand for my next one. So I have an oil change in reserve, and I do that with everything, with my hydraulic oils, with air filters, everything. I have all that stuff in reserve, ready to go. So spare parts, very important to your farm, to your life, to your livelihood, to your homestead, to whatever it is that you're living on. Make sure that you have the ability to do that. Even if you're living in a subdivision, it's super important and very vital, and it's something that tends to get overlooked. So guys, I hope that helps you out. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know this was a little bit longer, but certainly think the topic is interesting and definitely something that we all need to be considering. So we will talk to you guys later.